Greetings, groovers, seekers of sophistication, lovers of literature. How are you doing? I'm Nick Hennegan. Yes, I know. Oh, yes. In all my glory, I've still got my posh shirt as well, on Resonance 104.4 FM. And it's Literary London, where we talk about things, well, you know, literary and London-y. And yet again, that's why I mentioned my posh shirt, we're doing this both as a radio show on Resonance 104.4 FM, as a podcast on the Maverick Theatre Company podcast, and also as a YouTube video. So we're in visual, you know, changed, isn't it? Look, that's why I've got my posh shirt. I wore this last week as well. Go back and have a look. Anyway, so I'm very delighted to be talking, and we used to do this quite a lot going back last year, and I'm glad to start doing it again. Talking to a London author, Samantha Bewick, who is, as you said earlier, Samantha, going, call me Sam. So welcome, Sam. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Not coming in, of course, because one of the glories of I suppose, one of the upside of the of this terrible pandemic that we're in at the moment in February 2021 is that we can do these at home, really, or I can come into my little writing corridor, which I've got in Hammersmith. So we're talking about writing and just to chat a bit about you. You've got 3 books out at the moment, haven't you?
That's
tell
right.
us a bit about that, because I noticed there's a well, you tell us about them and I'll shut up. That's probably the best.
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on your podcast, your broadcast, your YouTube channel. I'm delighted to be here. I have now written 3 books, and I'm into detailed editing on the 4th. It's the Casey and Carville series, which is a present-day police procedural series with a decent dash of romance, set in Manhattan. I have actually wandered around the area where it is set in person. So if I say there's a coffee bar there, there is a coffee bar there. I might even have drunk coffee in it. The series is not, I set it in Manhattan because the American style of police procedural writing is rather lighter than the generally gritty British detective series. I'm very, very fond of British crime writing, but I'm not a terribly dark and gritty person myself. And while I admire the writers that do it, Minette Walters, Alex Gray, hundreds of others, all of whom I've enjoyed, I can't do that. I tend much more towards the lighter beach reading, in a way, something you would read if you want a nice, enjoyable murder, but you don't want to be depressed at the end of it.
It sounds fantastic, a nice, light, enjoyable murder. But I know what you mean. It's the genre's phenomenal, isn't it? I mean, what were you always drawn to this particular genre? What's made you write these?
What made me write these? Well, first of all, I like the police procedurals on TV. I have to say, I like Vera. I've got family in Northumberland, so it's very much a case of, oh, I've been there. I like the American cop shows, Bones, Castle, Ensis. I'm not terribly cultured, I'm afraid. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with some sight loss from glaucoma. And that really shocked me into thinking about what I'd like to do with my life. My job involved reading huge, heavy, technical, legal documents a lot of the time. My hobby was reading, more reading, further reading. And to be told that I'd lost almost a quarter of my vision before anything had been picked up really rocked my world in a very bad way. And one fine day, essentially, I thought, well, people write stories about the cop shows they like using the same characters, fan fiction. I'm sure you've heard of it and all your listeners will have heard of it. Why don't I give it a go? So I did. And really very much to my surprise, because writing lightweight fan fiction is not exactly the same as writing technical articles in the insolvency world, people liked it. So I did that for a while and learned an enormous amount from the criticism you get. And then as part of my job, a call was put out for people to write a film script to ground a global conference. It was really to hang all the lectures together and have something a bit more informal than very detailed legal stuff. And I put my hand up to do it with a contact in America. And we did that together, and we wrote a 45-minute film, starting with an exploding oil rig and involving fraud and negligence and a deeply dubious chairman of the board. And it was filmed by a professional company in London and shown at the conference to about 1,000 people or so, and it gets rolled out to other people. And people liked that, which was amazing. And so I thought, well, okay, this is fun. I like doing this. And I started working on my own novel in, essentially the same genre, crime, with some snappy banter, as I said, a dash of romance. And I worked on it in the background, and then I had 2 lots of eye surgery, and that really confirmed me in my desire that it was, if I was ever going to make a change, I was going to make it then. And I was lucky enough to be able to. And so I moved to writing full time.
It's interesting, isn't it? There's a friend of mine who I won't mention because I haven't checked with him if it's okay, who has had some success at writing TV, but actually had a heart attack and ended up with double heart surgery. And he sent me a picture of him sitting in bed, surrounded by all these screens. And he said, "I now know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life." Basically, because we'd spoken about writing quite a lot over the, and I've written a couple of screenplays, but mainly theatre, it was the same. I mean, horrible, and similarly for you, it's a terrible thing. But of course, one of the things about writing is you have to kind of do it, don't you? We're conditioned all our lives to do a job and go out and do. Actually, writing there's no one really. I mean, I once actually, sorry, I'm going on a bit, but I had a commission to write a book. I was commissioned to write some short stories for Chrysalis Publishing, as it was. In fact, they were erotic short stories, but that's another story. And it was remarkable writing to a deadline, because I knew I had to get the first draft done and stuff. So let's go a bit, because I can tell from your accent you're not from England. Let's go back a bit. What are your roots, if you don't mind me asking? You're not from here originally, obviously. Not from London.
I really amn't. Oh dear, I shouldn't say amn't. That's very Scottish, very Glasgow. I grew up just outside Glasgow in a reasonable sized village, 3 pubs, 3 churches, the Masonic Lodge and a tennis court, local primary school, that sort of thing, the style. I went to secondary school on the south side of Glasgow, just to the local very good comprehensive. And from there, I went to Oxford to study chemistry, which at the time, leaving Scotland for university was a thing not a lot of us really did. And school supported me all the way. It was a pretty new build comprehensive. And I have to say, plug for Mearns Castle High School, they were superb at supporting me then. So I had an excellent English teacher there. I don't remember her name this long on, but she really, put English into context for me. So I went to Oxford, and frankly, I wasn't as good as chemistry as I would have needed to be to stay in chemistry. Which is a polite way of saying I got through. And like so many people did, if you weren't very good at chemistry, but you had a good background in maths and you were generally broadly educated, I went to be an accountant, like about half my year of chemists did. It's a very popular choice. And really, for me, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do at all. I thought, oh, well, chemistry, I'll go and be a pharmaceuticals person, or the oil industry, which was obviously really big in Aberdeen then. And when I found that actually chemistry was definitely not my thing, I was a bit lost. And accountancy essentially gave me 3 years to not have to worry about it. And I'd come out with a respectable qualification at the other end. So I joined KPMG. I qualified as an accountant with them. I moved into restructuring and insolvency just before I qualified, and I spent almost 30 years very happily at KPMG. If I hadn't had the eye problems, I probably never have left.
And they've got a lovely building as well. Is that where you were at the KPMG in London, in the
Yes,
centre?
yes. I was in London for all but 1 year. I spent a year on secondment in Moscow, which was a tremendous experience.
Yeah, God, that must have been incredible. And because you moved to West London. I mean, we're in Hammersmith at the moment, and I live in Chiswick, and you're in Chiswick too. And in fact, we spoke to Torrin Douglas about, is Chiswick the most writerly place in the world? Because apparently, I mean, without realizing, we've got an incredible, the Chiswick area of West London has got an incredible pedigree. The sort of people that ended up moving there. I mean, possibly because of the there was the estate, wasn't there? Anyway, I mean, it's almost coincidental, but a lot of people moved to West London, and you're there, and you're also a bit involved with the book festival as well, I understand.
Yes. Chiswick Library put me on to the book festival and to Torrin Douglas. They were incredibly helpful and introduced me. And Torrin was kind enough to let me join in the local authors panel, and it was a fantastic experience, especially under COVID with the videoing and no ability for him to have a real audience. It was still a remarkably connected thing. And I'd no idea there were so many other local authors now.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I know. Yes, the Harold Pinter up at the High Road was surprised me a little bit. And there's a sort of a Chiswick guide, I think, that Torrin Book Festival have put together. If you go to the Chiswick Book Festival their website, there'll be a link there. So I'm standing on the shadow of giants, really, or at least the shadow of giants as well. So did you think, were you always going to write? I mean, the terrible news about your vision must have been horrible, but there must have been something in your background or something in your mind that made you realize the one thing that you really want to do now is write. So did you always write? Have you always played around with it?
I always read, from as early as I can remember, from little board books right up to classics. I suppose I did a certain amount of teenage drivel, angst-ridden disgracefulness that I profoundly hope I burned unseen. But really, no, it wasn't. I was writing technical articles and contributions to textbooks as part of my job. I was rather at the slightly more academic end of practice. So I did a lot of that. And obviously, restructuring and insolvency, you're writing reports that are going to be read by everybody from very senior officials to people who maybe aren't used to reading technical reports. So you have to write in a style that's very clear to everybody, but that is a collaborative experience. I mean, a report like that, everybody in the team contributes. So writing, light fiction by myself was a bit of a big change, but like I said, I started in fan fiction, and the The really good thing about fan fiction is that you get to make mistakes without necessarily feeling guilty about it.
Just explain what fan fiction is to anyone that might not know.
Yeah, okay. Fan fiction is where well, for TV, I'm never quite sure of the ethics about fan fiction on books, but for TV, you like a show, you like the characters, and maybe you want to know what happened after the episode finished or in between the seasons. So you write your own story, but you use the characters that someone else has invented. And there are 2 or 3 really enormous hosted sites where you can post it and do the absolutely terrifying bit of waiting to see if anybody comments. And since it's the internet and comments are, broadly speaking, anonymous or at least under pen names, people are brutally honest. It can be extremely painful. It can also be extremely nice.
Yes. I mean, the internet, of course, currently the focus and the spotlight's on that as well. It sounds like great fun. I mean, I've not done it myself, but it sounds like great fun. Did you have particular favourites?
Well, I only wrote and write, because it's a switch off from writing my own stuff. I only write for the American cop show Castle, which was cancelled in 2016 or something like that. And I just connected with the characters a bit, it was, and police procedural.
Oh, it sounds like great fun. So I'm Nick Hennegan. This is Resonance 104.4 FM. We're also on the Maverick Theatre YouTube channel. Hey, that's why I've got my posh shirt on, my nicely coloured short. I'm talking to Samantha Bewick about a local writer, about her books. And in fact, perhaps, Sam, I sort of did prime you slightly. You've got 3 books out at the moment, and we'll go into in fact, maybe we should talk a bit about those now, the title. So it's Death, the common sort of title is Death. Then you've got Death in Focus, Death in Camera, and Death in Sight. And you've got a little bit. I asked you if you've got a little bit you could read.
Yes.
So should we do that just to get a flavour of what you've done, which is great.
Right. We will read a little bit from the middle book, Death in Camera. Just to put it very slightly in context, the Death in books star a team of 4 detectives led by female detective Casey Clement. She is generally partnered by her enormous friend O'Leary. He's a college American footballer. He is 6'10", 54-inch chest, homely. He's also gay. They work with Tyler, who came into the police from the army, and Andy, who is the techno-geek brains of the team. They all have secrets, they all have histories, and they really do not play nice with other people. In Death in Camera, they have just been called to the corpse of a dead woman found in a park up around 125th Street in Manhattan. So, hell of a looker, Tyler said bleakly as the corpse was straightened out. He wasn't wrong. She was easily 5'10", and most of the height came from her legs. Even Casey, a woman in possession of an excellent pair of legs, envied those legs and the height they provided. An extra couple of inches would have been nice. Well, she would have envied it had the legs been attached to a live woman. She has been shot through the head, MacDonald pointed out, which was entirely unnecessary since they could all see that. However, she has also been beaten. There are no defensive wounds apparent. His disapproval deepened. Most peculiar, as is the dilation of the pupils. His thin fingers lifted an eyelid to demonstrate. I shall need to perform an extensive talk screen, he directed at CSU. Furthermore, it appears from my initial appraisal that the assault was post-mortem. Casey said, echoed by the three cops. That was weird. Beating to death was nasty, but unfortunately common, as beatings often caused deaths, accidentally or otherwise. Beating after death tended to go with beating to death when the murderer forgot to stop wailing on the victim. Otherwise, most criminals were lazy and didn't waste effort hitting corpses. Shooting and then beating after death was unusual, which meant that this death was likely a properly Casey-flavoured case.
Brilliant. That sounds, I need to know more about that. So it's interesting as well. So you've been to, well, let's talk about the process a little bit. So obviously these are set in Manhattan. So you say, was that because you got an eye to the American market, or is it just somewhere that you like? And how was the research? That must have been fun.
The research is always fun. Well, for a start, the fan fiction is also set in Manhattan, so I was slightly more familiar. Secondly, I really like New York. I've been there a few times for work and then for holidays. And as I said, I've specifically been to this area. There is actually a real NYPD police precinct building exactly where Casey's fictional one is. I borrowed the outside of the building, but not the interior. The research, apart from actually having been to the area in general and wandered around it, you can find almost anything on Google. Google Street Maps is a fantastic resource because you can walk up and down. You know, it's a bit like getting the tube. You can go and walk up and down the streets of Manhattan or Shanghai almost as easily as you can here. I do a lot of research. I mean, it ranges from, was this restaurant, coffee bar, exhibition, museum, was it actually open on the date I say it was open? I've researched what order the cuts are done in an autopsy. That was a bit gruesome. For Death in Focus, which majors on financial fraud because of scientific fraud, I went back to my degree days and looked up a research paper on the work that my fictional people are doing. I have to say I didn't read it in great detail, but the abstract was enough. So yeah, if I don't have working internet, I find it very difficult to write because there will be things that pop up that I want to check up on right away.
It is interesting how the internet's kind of changed everything for all of us in a sense. And what about your writing process? I mean, how fabulous how horrible that it was your health that made you decide to write full time. But did you replace your 9 to 5 routine with a writing routine? What's your writing routine? And also, Catherine California emailed. She always reckons she listens to us on the beach. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, Catherine California will want to know, do you use a writing software package? And if so, which one and why?
I don't. I use standard Word because I was used to it at work and I can make it go.
Actually, Glenn Chandler, who's the writer of Taggart and things, Glenn's the same. He just uses, when I did a program, it's Scottish as well. That was a very bad accent.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So what about your sort of, how do you process your time and motivate yourself?
Right. Well, I tend to take a couple of cups of coffee to get going in the mornings, and I don't tend to do a lot of writing in the mornings. Usually when the gyms were open, I would tend to go to the gym then, because otherwise I just sit like a potato on the sofa all day. I usually get going after lunch. I wouldn't say I necessarily wrote continuously. I'm a great procrastinator, and there's a meme around, writing is 90% not messing around on the internet, which absolutely true. But I'm very bad at messing around on the internet. But I have a vague target of 1,000 words a day. I don't beat myself up if I don't make it, because there's always days when you don't. But I try and write every day. And if I do more than 1,000 words, I'm happy.
Yes. And you you got a PC?
Yeah, it's
or...
all on the laptop. When we get round to it, you said you had a few problems with the broadband. We've had a few problems with ours. When we get round to it, I'm going to get 2 of those lovely big screens where you can move, where I can see everything at once.
Oh, that would be fine. Russell T Davies, you know, he's written, Russell T Davies, television writer. He's got a computer screen that's the same size as a piece of paper. It's that way up. The orientation is long rather. That impressed me when I first saw that.
Yeah.
And some people will sweat. I mean, do you use pen and paper nowadays, or have you ever used that, or is it just your sort of business background that's got your mind focused on that?
Sometimes I do use pen and paper. If I was going somewhere on the tube, or I was going on a reasonable train journey, I might use pen and paper rather than the laptop. Although, you know, if the laptop had enough charge, I'd prefer to start there. But then I would transcribe it into Word as soon as possible. I find it much easier to edit in Word. But my current, the outline of the 4th book, which still doesn't have a title, is started in Word and currently has pen and ink all over it, as I've scribbled.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting process, isn't it? And I always get lots of emails about, yeah. And so do you have a writing space? Have you got a particular space you go to?
No, I sit on the sofa and I write. Usually I said I procrastinate. I don't so much watch TV, but I like to have the noise on in the background.
Yeah.
I have no real interest in golf, I'm afraid, but it's awfully good background. Unlike the rugby, which I really do watch.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
At the moment, we're in the middle of the Six Nations, February 2021, and it's been that's been quite dramatic. Oh, it's brilliant. So it was lovely talking to you. And so things are pretty good then at the moment. How long have you been writing full time for since your problems?
I published the first one in May 2018. Am I allowed to say they're all available on Amazon?
No, in fact, that was my next question, because we sometimes talk about, or we used to talk about the going down the self-publishing route or down the sort of traditional publishing route. It's now really not even a debate, is it? You've got to self-publish. So I was going to say, if anyone, because we've run out of time, typical, isn't it? If anyone wants to know any more about you or your books, where should we go?
Right. My Twitter account is at Garrae _writes, and I'm in that all the time. So if you tag me in a tweet, I will get it pretty quickly.
Right,
time zones.
Yeah, it's SR Garrae, isn't it? Is your nom de plume, as it were?
Yes.
Yeah, SR Garrae.
Yep.
And yeah.
The books are all on Amazon under SR Garrae, and they're also in Goodreads. So for any of your listeners who are Goodreads people, you can do questions and things on Goodreads. I'm on LinkedIn as Samantha Bewick. It's obviously that carried over from work. I'm on Facebook, but I don't go there very often. So really, Twitter, Amazon, and LinkedIn.
Okay, and the books are Death in Focus, Death in Camera, and Death Inside. And we've kind of run out of time, but thank you so much for coming along, and good luck with everything. I'm sure we'll meet you at the next Chiswick Book Fair Festival, wherever it is. So thanks very much. That was Samantha Bewick. I'm Nick Hennegan. I'll see you next time. This is Resonance 104.4 FM.